Thank you. Welcome back. We are resuming the meeting now and we are moving to item 8.2 and we welcome Ms Johnson to provide a presentation. So over to you and thank you.
Good morning, Madam Mayor and Councillors, CEO. Today I'm here to present a report on a development application for a material change of use for outdoor sport and recreation, being an aero modelling club on Yandina Coolum Road at Valdoria. The application is before Council today due to the level of community interest in the application. The subject site comprises 2 rural lots with a total area of 107 hectares, located at 801 to 845 Yandina Coolum Road, accessed from 76 to 88 Dines Road. The site's located immediately north of the Sunshine Coast Solar Farm. The land is low-lying and forms part of the Blue Heart, located to the north of the Maroochy River. The site is within the rural zone under the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme 2014, and the land surrounding the site is also included in the rural zone, apart from the adjoining solar farm, which is included in the community facilities zone. The site is overlooked by properties located to the west of Valdoria Road, located in the foothills of Mount Ninderry and included in the rural residential zone. The proposed aero modelling club involves establishing 2 grass runways with a pilot area positioned to the northeast of the runway axis. A small transportable building is proposed to contain an office and storage area and provide toilet amenities for members and visitors. The development is proposed to have all-weather gravel access from Dines Road via existing farm tracks within the site. A gravel car parking area is proposed to be established to provide 10 car parking spaces for members and visitors. The application indicates a maximum of 20 club members are likely to attend the site on any operating day and up to a total of 40 people on the site, including friends and family. To minimise impacts, the applicant has identified that the club would have no more than 5 model aircraft in operation at any time. The airfield is centrally located within the site and the outer perimeter of the overfly buffer area is 50 metres away from the nearest site boundary. The use is required to comply with all industry rules and regulations, including the requirements of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, or CASA. The applicant advises that model aircraft would be flown no more than 120 metres above ground level. The club is a member of the Model Aeronautical Association of Australia and of Queensland, and those associations offer educational programs, insurance and a framework for rules to govern the safe operation of model aircraft. The application was referred to the State Assessment and Referral Agency for concurrence agency assessment due to being on a state transport corridor. The department provided a referral agency response, which included a condition that direct access was not permitted from Yandina Coolum Road and the subject site. The application was also referred to the Sunshine Coast Airport, who were unable to provide comment without advice from Air Services. The applicant since advised that they didn't intend to make an application to Air Services as the development was not within the operational airspace and meets the CASA requirements. A total of 262 submissions were made during the public notification period, including 208 properly made submissions. There were 145 submissions made objecting to the proposal, with issues raised including risks from accidents to people, property and road users, noise impacts, visual impacts, threats to livestock and horse riders, traffic and dust impacts. And the matters raised in the 116 submissions supporting the proposal included information about the way the club operates, distance from surrounding premises being adequate to lessen safety, visual or noise impacts, why the site suits the need of the club and the personal and community benefits of the club. There's a summary on the slide just there. So this slide shows the location of submitters. So the red dots are objections to the proposal and the green dots show support for the proposal. So as you can see, the green dots showing the support comes from across the broader Sunshine Coast region, whereas the objections are located in concentration around the subject site. So the key assessment considerations are listed for you there. The application is impact assessable and has been assessed against the whole of the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme 2014. Based on the outcomes sought by the planning scheme and the matters raised in submission, these are the key considerations which I'll take you through in more detail now. So the development involves an activity within proximity to the Sunshine Coast Airport. The minimum obstacle limitation surface within the proposed flight zone and buffer area is 130 metres above ground level. The applicant has identified that this activity would involve model aircraft being flown to a maximum height of 120 metres. Many submissions were made in relation to concerns about the noise from the proposed use, particularly about the operation of jet engine models. The noise impact assessment submitted confirmed that the use would satisfy the noise criteria of the planning scheme at nearby sensitive receivers. The nearest sensitive receiver is the dwelling associated with the equestrian centre to the north, which is located approximately 700 metres away from the location of the airfield. The image on the right there shows the noise levels generated if 6 jet engine aircraft were being operated at the same time, with the dark green line indicating when noise impacts would be at an acceptable level. Importantly, only 5 model aircraft are proposed to be operated at a time, so the noise impacts would be less than those modelled. The site is in a high-value scenic area and fronts Yandina Coolum Road, which is mapped as a scenic route. While the airfield would be visible from the Mountain Injury Lookout, the scale and bulk of the buildings proposed would have minimal impact on the expansive view of the valley and broader landscape. The proposed airfield is located over 350 metres away from Yandina Coolum Road, and the height of the buildings would not impede any views to the significant landscape features in the distance. With regards to traffic, council officers are satisfied that the use would not generate any impacts to the function of the major road corridor or cause an unreasonable level of risk to road users. The low level of traffic was determined to be comparable to the type of development expected to occur within a rural area and unlikely to result in any significant impacts to the safety and function of Dines Road. Amenity impacts from dust and noise from vehicles would be limited to a few dwellings on Dines Road. The site contains good quality agricultural land and is used for agricultural purposes. The airfield and associated parking areas and buildings are proposed to be located on the edge of the Class C land in a location that would minimise impact to agricultural production on the site. The land is located within the western periphery of the Blue Heart and subject to flooding and storm tide inundation. To ensure the development does not compromise natural tidal progression, it was considered appropriate to include a condition requiring the use be limited to a 10-year period. Outdoor sport and recreation is a potentially consistent use in the rural zone and may occur where assessment has determined that the use is appropriate, having regard to the location, nature, scale and intensity. As previously discussed, the assessment found that the location would not result in any significant impacts or departure from the outcomes sought for the rural zone, as the development site is adequately separated from surrounding premises and would maintain the utility of good quality agricultural land. The nature of the use was also determined to be compatible with the range of uses expected to occur in the rural zone, including uses occurring on the site and the surrounding area, which also involve the operation of machinery that makes noise during the day and would not have any nighttime impacts. Furthermore, the Aeromodelling Club is proposed to be relatively small scale, involving a maximum of 40 people to the site on any operating day, and the intensity of the use would be limited to a maximum of 5 model aircraft being operated at any time. The assessment also considered other relevant matters that may warrant approval or refusal of an application under the Planning Act, including planning need, locational requirements for the use, site suitability and community benefit. Whilst the matters of need, site suitability and community benefit assist to support approval of the application, they've not been relied upon as grounds for approval, as the application material demonstrates sufficient compliance with the planning scheme in relation to the nature, scale and intensity of the use in the location proposed. On balance, the assessment found that the potentially consistent use would not result in any significant impacts and would sufficiently comply or could be conditioned to comply with the outcomes sought by the planning scheme. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval subject to the imposition of reasonable and relevant conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to present a motion for this report. My motion reads that Council A, receive and note the report titled Material Change of Use to Premises to Establish Outdoor Sport and Recreation, Aero Modelling Club, and B, refuse application number MCU 24/0113 situated at 76 to 88 Dines Road and 801 to 845 Yandina Coolum Road, Valdora, for a material change of use to establish an outdoor sport and recreation aero modelling club for the following reasons. Traffic. The site is serviced by a gravel road which does not achieve the minimum standard required for an outdoor sport and recreation use. 2, the provision of car parking spaces is insufficient for proposed intensity of the use. 3, accordingly, the proposed development demonstrates non-compliance with the following assessment benchmarks of the planning scheme: Transport and Parking Code, Overall Outcomes C and D, Performance Outcomes 3 of Table 9.4.8.3.1, and Performance Outcomes 17 and 22 of Table 9.4.8.3.2. And secondly, Rural Zone Code Overall Outcome 2, Section S. Visual amenity. Yandina Coolum Road is identified as a scenic route and the site is located in a high-value scenic area that is characterised by open rural land. The proposed buildings would be visible from surrounding elevated areas, including the ranges and lookout from Mount Ninderry. The proposed development would impede views to the significant landscape features in the distance and would not protect the significant landscape elements that contribute to the unique character and identity of the Sunshine Coast. And 7, accordingly, the proposed development demonstrates non-compliance with the following assessment benchmarks of the planning scheme: Rural Zone Code, Overall Outcome L and N, and Scenic Amenity Overlay Code, Overall Outcome 2A1 and 4, and Performance Outcomes 1.6 of Table 8.2.12.3.1. Flooding. The site is impacted by regional flooding and would be entirely inundated in a major flood event. The site is also subject to relatively regular low-level flood events that would affect safe access to the airfield and would inundate the airfield, making it unsuitable for flying model aircraft. 9, any buildings to be located on the site are not proposed to be located above the flood level. 10, the site may be subject to tidal inundation due to climate change in the medium term, and it is considered inappropriate to allow development to occur on the site that would compromise natural tidal progression. 11, accordingly, the proposed development demonstrates non-compliance with the following assessment benchmarks of the planning scheme. The Rural Zone Code Overall Outcome R and Flood Hazard Overlay Code Overall Outcomes 2A, C and D, and Performance Outcomes 3 and 9 of Table 8.2.7.3.2. Noise and dust. The development proposes inadequate separation from sensitive uses in the surrounding area and would result in a substantial impact on the amenity and character of Valdora Valley. 13, the use of Dines Road, an unsealed gravelled road, to access the site will contribute to amenity impacts for residents' properties from noise and dust. It has not been sufficiently demonstrated that the development site is located to ensure that noise emissions do not unreasonably impact on the surrounding sensitive receivers and residential premises. 15, accordingly, the proposed development demonstrates non-compliance with the following assessment benchmarks of the planning scheme. 1, Nuisance Code, Purpose and Overall Outcomes 1A, 2A1, and Performance Outcome 1.9 of Table 9.4.3.3.1, and Rural Zone Code Overall Outcome F. Acid sulphate soils. 16, the development application has not provided sufficient information in relation to acid sulphate soils investigation or management plan. 17, accordingly, the proposed development demonstrates non-compliance with the following assessment benchmarks of the planning scheme. 1, Acid Sulphate Soils Overlay Code, Overall Outcomes 2A, and the Performance Outcomes 1A and B of Table 8.2.1.3.1. Airports and aviation facilities. The development application has not provided sufficient information in relation to whether the activity would result in any intrusion into the operational airspace of the Sunshine Coast Airport. Accordingly, the proposed development demonstrates non-compliance with the following assessment benchmarks of the planning scheme. 1, Airport Environs Overlay Code, overall outcome 2A, and performance outcome 1 of table 8.2.2.3.2. And secondly, State Planning Policy Part E, Infrastructure, Strategic Airports and Aviation Facilities, Assessment Benchmarks, Strategic Airports and Aviation Facilities. Relevant matters, there is no economic, planning or community need for the proposed development. 21, on the material currently before Council, compliance with the assessment benchmarks cannot be achieved by the imposition of conditions. And 22, there are no discretionary matters which warrant approval of the proposed development. And then further to that, C, I request that the Chief Executive Officer review the Regional Facilities Plan for difficult to locate sports as endorsed by Council on the 28th of March 2019 and provide Council with an update of activities undertaken to progress a regional aero modelling facility. And part 1, advocate to the Queensland Government for assistance to facilitate the establishment of a regional aero modelling facility. And secondly, to undertake a review of council-owned land that may be suitable for relocation of the Sunshine Coast Model Flyers Incorporated Club as a local club by May 2025 and make the findings of that review available to all stakeholders.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Suarez. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bunnag. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Suarez, would you like to speak to the motion now?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have been advised by Councillor Bunnag not to use the term blunt instrument, or he has threatened to use a blunt instrument on me, so I'd like to report Councillor Bunnag for harassment.
Duly noted, thank you.
Okay, thank you. As heard in the presentation, outdoor sport and recreation, and it's also in the report, is a potentially consistent use in the rural zone, but only where further assessment has determined that the use is appropriate in the zone, having regard to such matters as its location, its nature, scale and intensity. And that will be the crux of my debate today. There are two valid considerations to this application. There is no doubt that Suncoast Model Flyers are a well-loved club and have a number of members who benefit greatly from the social nature of the activities that occur. And they have been displaced and need to find a new location. And secondly, there is no doubt that residents in the surrounding locality will be subjected to impacts by the club's activities when you compare existing uses to the uses outlined in this application. With these two opposing considerations in mind, the main thing that councillors need to weigh their decision on goes back to the planning scheme. The use is a potentially consistent use, but only when the location, nature, scale and intensity is taken into account. So is this the right location? Proximity to the airport. Council relied on an email from MAAQ, which is the Model Aero Association of Queensland, and their advice stated that the land at 7688 Dines Road meets all the requirements outlined by CASA to operate planes to 400 feet. This advice was not uploaded to Development Eye, and thank you, Deborah, for providing that to me this morning. However, the image was cut off, but that's okay. I've got some more information I can go to. I did find a document from MAAQ, which was from their general meeting on the 21st of November 2023. And they talked about airspace suitability, and it states that it is in the controlled airspace, so will require an area approval for operation over 400 feet. Now, the club doesn't propose to operate over 400 feet, but if they did, they would require an approval. If I could ask meeting management to upload a photo that I took earlier. I did ask council if we ourselves undertook any investigations to find out whether or not the Model Aero Club required approval from CASA. And CASA says in their advisory circular AC 101-3 version 2, flying a model aircraft or drone for recreation or education. And in that document it states, controlled aerodromes 3.1.3.5, model aircraft weighing more than 250 grams must not operate within 3 nautical miles, which is 5.5 kilometres, or over or within the approach and departure paths of a controlled aerodrome. Now, I don't know where that goes from. Does it go from the runway? Does it go from the property boundary? Does it go to the end of the runway? Does it the airport runway? Does it go to the airport property boundary? So I took a couple of measurements, and to be most generous, I took the distance from the overfly area to the end of runway 31, which was 5.69 kilometres, just outside of that zone. If it's from boundary to boundary, it's 4.83 kilometres, which is within CAS's requirement to have that approval. The second thing as well is the airport is currently undergoing its post-implementation review, and while it is outside of the flight area, I might just bring up MAAQs. Actually, Tegan, can you bring up in your presentation was an image that looked similar to this that showed the overfly area? Yes, that's all. No. That one, yes, thank you. So you can see, I haven't got accurate measurements, but you can see the overfly area to the north of the Model Air Club site to where the airport overfly zone is not very far, approximately 100 metres. The site from the overfly area on the eastern side to the airport area is approximately 200 metres. I don't have accurate distance, so very close. Part of the post-implementation review has received submissions, and one from another area of the region, which is actually going to negatively impact the Valdora people if it gets approved. It is currently under investigation, and it is to realign that flight path slightly further west, which will change those overlay areas. So it's situated while it's outside, it's only just outside. So location is an issue. It's also flooded. The buildings were relocated to the site
Councillor Suarez, would you like an extension of time?
I may.
Okay, so Councillor Johnston moved, seconded Councillor Hungerford. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Suarez.
Thank you. Flooded location. The buildings were relocated to the site prior to the application being lodged, and it is my understanding that the buildings, including the amenities building that has a self-contained sewerage system requiring pump outs, is not located above the floor level required for that flood area. In page 59 of the agenda, in the detailed assessment report, the access road it says that access road does not achieve minimum standard required for a rural access place and may not ordinarily be considered particularly suitable for an outdoor sport and recreation use. Preferably, it is to be provided with access via a sealed road. We know that requiring the club to seal the road is too big of an ask. The other question is access to this site, whether there will be events or not events. The club have indicated they do not intend to have an event at this time. The club has had events in the past, and I actually would encourage the club to have events if they were located in a suitable location. The events bring people to the club and let them show their skills off to the broader community. It gets extra people interested in the club and perhaps provides additional membership for the club. So by restricting them to not have any events to restrict the use, the impacts on the road is actually hamstringing the club. The future probable need to raise the access road into the site to provide suitable evacuation to the site is eventually going to need fill. As we know, in this area, it is quite inundated, and we have had a strong stance of no further intensification on our rural properties in that location. This is a changing landscape, potentially with no-fly zones going over the club's area, and it will definitely flood in the future. When I look at nature and noise, noise is a complex topic. The noise report has measured effects with the use of decibels, and what's important to understand with the measurement of decibels is it's not linear. So 5 decibels and 10 decibels. 10 decibels is not double, it's different. The 3 decibel rule means that the sound energy is doubled, but not necessarily the sound perception. An increase of 10 decibels, no matter where you are on the decibel scale, is a perceived doubling of noise. However, some studies, because it is subjective, some studies have indicated that that can be a range between 5 to 10 decibels with the perceived doubling of noise. Rural areas have lower ambient noise levels than urban areas, and ambient noise has been identified as a factor that influences the perception of noise annoyance. And I always use the analogy of if your phone rings in the middle of the day while you're in the office, you just hear your phone ring, and it's not a huge interference. However, when your phone rings in the middle of the night, it is the same noise, but it sounds a lot louder, and that is because the ambient noise level is a lot lower. And that's many of the reasons why people go and buy in these rural areas. It is the frequency of the noise annoyance, not necessarily the loudness of the noise, that could be the impact. Ride-ons, overhead planes, they have much louder noise, but they're not potentially a consistent noise source. Unlike noise that we are going to allow from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m, 6 days a week, with Sundays operating from 12 to 4. Scale, based on current information and assumptions. The membership base is currently approximately 100 members. What happens if a neighbouring venue, who MAAQ identified as probably facing tenure issues, is required to relocate or close down? It would be very convenient to have the clubs amalgamate, which would result in a significant and immediate increase in membership, making the assumptions of scale for the approval in front of us flawed. More members, more traffic, more sessions, longer flying times. Is it a local club or will it be used as a competition venue? The report is conflicting, and the scale of use is vital in determining the noise, traffic, dust and visual impacts. The applicant says, as I mentioned, no comps at this time. I think they are shooting themselves in the foot if they don't have displays and competitions at whatever venue they end up with. The runways on this site are currently assessed. They are cross runways at 175 metres and the other one is at 200 metres in length. The applicant has advised that the site is proposed to accommodate runways of 300 metres in length. So that also changes the assumptions made in this report. Yes, I need another extension.
Thank you. I'm prepared to allow a second extension of time if I have a mover, Councillor Bunnag, and seconded, Councillor Burns. Thank you. Put that to the vote. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Suarez.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Intensity. On page 63 of the report, it states the intensity is limited by the size of the runway and space available for flying. As I mentioned, the size of the runway is in question and the intensity of use allows for 7 to 4 p.m, 6 days a week and 12 to 4 on Sundays. In comparison with rural activities, neighbouring landowners don't mow every day. They don't run their tractors every day from 7 till 4. So the noise annoyance is intermittent and sporadic. However, the Aeromodel Club is unlikely to also fly for all hours it is open, but it has the potential to operate every day that weather allows. This site, as mentioned by the officers, suits the need of the club, but it does not suit the needs of the surrounding community, and it does not suit the proximity to the airport and the potential changes that are going there. I look forward to questions. I know a number of councillors will have some questions and look forward to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillor Landsberg.
Thank you, through the Chair. And may I just ask some questions and then reserve the right to speak to the motion?
Certainly.
Thank you. To the officers, and thank you for the extensive report in regards to the work in regards to this MCU proposal. The locational, in the detailed assessment report, it speaks, sorry, I hate talking and my back, so my apologies. In the detailed assessment report, it talks about locational requirements, and the applicant has advised that requirements for a suitable site to accommodate local aeromodelling activities based on the club's experience at the previous Coolum location. Obviously, the need for 25 hectare site, a flying area of 600 metres by 600 metres. It goes through clear airfield, minimum length of landing and takeoff, a flat, open and obstacle-free flying area, separation from sensitive uses, suitable for prevailing winds, outside of the airport obstacle limitation service and flight path, accessibility to the Sunshine Coast community. And just touching on the alternative motion that's been put up by Councillor Maria, one of the last comments there is obviously to undertake a review of Sunshine Coast owned land, as for a possible relocation for the aeromodelling club. Do you feel that there would be other suitable locations on the Sunshine Coast that would meet those requirements?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not something we've investigated extensively as part of this. However, I do understand the club have been searching for a site for the past couple of years since they were aware that they had to relocate. However, yeah, we're assessing the application based on this particular site. So, yeah, I couldn't make a comment on whether there are alternative sites available. However, I understand it has been quite a process to find a site that meets their requirements.
Thank you. And may I ask how many years has the club been operating from the Coolum site?
I believe approximately 20 years from the Coolum site, yep.
And during that period, have we got a record of the number of complaints that council has received over that 20-year period?
It's my understanding that we haven't received any complaints about the operation there. Yep.
So in discussion, you would look at this club as being a responsible, active group of the community in regards to their operational activities?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we're looking at the proposal that's in front of us and exactly what they're proposing on this particular site. So that's probably more of what our assessment is based on rather than necessarily looking at how they operated because I understand they did operate in a different capacity at the alternate site.
In regards to the days of use, the report speaks around average 273 days a year, and obviously you've got to have suitable weather conditions. I believe the remote control planes don't like flying above 15 kilometres an hour. In relation to obviously the Sunshine Coast weather, was that just that data, was that just collected over just a 12-month period annually or over a significant period of time?
Yeah, I'm probably unable to answer that one. I'm sorry, in terms of that weather, I'm not sure.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, councillors, we are going to resume the meeting and we will continue without technology. That does mean we don't have microphones and we will do our best to speak so that you can hear us. We apologise, of course, for this difficulty. You will notice we are recording the meeting on a phone so that we will, at a later point as soon as possible, be able to edit that and have that available online because we are unable to live stream currently with this situation. We have Councillor Dixon on Teams joining us here. I have a visual of him, as does Ms Brassau here, so we have Councillor Dixon on Teams, and you will notice that Councillor Johnston has left the meeting as he is unwell. So we will continue in this manner to progress through the agenda of this ordinary meeting. Again, we apologise, this has never happened before. We are in uncharted territory, but we do remember before technology that we used pen and paper and computers to keep our notes and our minutes, etc., and that is what we will continue to do today. So now we continue. Councillor Landsberg was in the middle of asking questions, so back to you, Councillor Landsberg, in your loudest voice for the gallery and everyone gathered here today with your questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Today's been nothing to be above ordinary, not ordinary, I would imagine. Obviously, my question before was just relating in regards to some of the operational activities of the Eremorel Playing Club. I just wanted to ask the question, in one of the submissions from concern from the submitters was around the potential of the planes, remote control planes crashing and causing fire, and I know we touched on fire management, and there was a comment in there about impact to the solar farm, and I'm just asking whether one of our officers wanted to sort of touch on what's our procedure in regards to protecting the solar farm if there was a significant fire in that area.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So as Councillor Landsberg touched on, we do have conditions within the approval that deal with fire management. So in particular, requirements around not operating on days that are declared as high, extreme, catastrophic Australian fire danger rating or total fire ban days, so prohibited on those days. And no person is permitted to be on site, so there wouldn't be any flying activity. And then obviously, I guess the catch-all then is the requirement for the club to have firefighting equipment available on site. So both an amount of water and also particular fittings to enable the rural fire brigade to connect in the event that there was a fire. But yeah, obviously taking all those requirements into account. Not specific to the solar farm, I guess, but in terms of their actual operation, really strict requirements around the fire management.
Thank you. And I suppose in regards to, it's probably not an answer to protecting the solar farm, but I imagine our emergency services would be inactive in that case, and we expect them to protect it. I'm sure the council would be very mindful of protecting a very valuable asset to the community. The other question, Madam Mayor, was just around the buildings in a floodplain area, and there's obviously a comment around the resilient building, and it's demountable. Is that easily removed off-site in regards to if we have a major flood?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so the building proposed is just a demountable building, and the requirements through the building approval would be for it to be flood resilient, also taking into account the fact that we're proposing to condition a 10-year approval to manage that flood risk going forward into the future.
Thank you. No further questions.
Next to speak is Councillor Hungerford.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm struggling today. We've had one application that couldn't meet any of the benchmarks in the town plan, pushed for approval, and now we've got one that has met all the benchmarks, and we're now looking at putting a refusal forward. So I'm really having problems struggling with logic today. What I will do is, I may need some extensions, is the planning report here is very clear, right through in detail. But for the benefit of the public, I'll cover a lot of this ground. Starting with the strategic framework. The site is located in the rural enterprise and landscape area and a high scenic value area characterised by open rural farmland surrounded by mountain ranges and natural vegetated areas. The proposed outdoor recreational use is considered to achieve the outcomes sought by the strategic framework in the planning scheme for the following reasons. The use has a limited development footprint. An operation of the use can be managed to maintain the rural enterprise, agricultural production and environmental values of the site and surrounding areas. The use has a direct link to the aviation and aerospace industry, which is a key part of the local economy and the community identity of the Sunshine Coast. The use is a competitive recreational activity that could attract visitors and spectators to the area if events were to be held. The scale and use could be limited to minimise possible noise, traffic, dust and visual impacts. And reasonable and relevant conditions could be applied if the development were to be approved. The use would have minimal impact on existing infrastructure and the transport network is adequate for the amount of traffic likely to be generated by the use. The establishment of a grass runway and small-scale buildings on the site would have a limited impact on the scenic and landscape values of the area. Noting the Sunshine Coast Solar Farm is located in close proximity to the site and has a more dominant visual impact on the landscape. The use is an inclusive, non-discriminatory recreational activity which allows people with diverse skills and backgrounds to share a common interest in aviation, remote control hobbies and aerospace technology and be part of an active and engaged community group. The use allows members of the public to develop special skills and knowledge that can assist them to improve their employability and career opportunities. The use is a difficult to locate activity which is best suited to a location that is highly accessible, also has benefits from a high level of separation from built-up areas, which can only be found in rural areas. The development is therefore considered to generally achieve and not compromise the outcome sought by the strategic framework for development in the rural enterprise and landscape area in a high-value scenic area. Now, the site is affected by a number of constraining overlays identified in the planning scheme, relating to acid sulphate soils, the airport environments, building height, flood hazard, and regional infrastructure major road corridor. The site is also identified as being adjacent to a scenic route and having scenic values. As the development involves minimal site works, council officers are satisfied that conditions can be applied to ensure risks associated with the potential release of contamination from disturbing acid sulphate soils are properly mitigated. As previously discussed, council officers are also satisfied that the use would be operated to avoid intrusion into operational airspace and therefore avoid any impact on the operation of the Sunshine Coast Airport. And if you look at that, having to do it this way, I'm losing my place. Okay, the minimum obstacle limitation surface within a flight zone buffer area is 130 metres above ground level. The distances we saw from an airport before were relative to that. If you're going to go 130 metres or above, then it would apply to you. In this case, it is not. The applicant has identified that the activity would not result in any intrusion into the operational airspace, as the flight zone, including a 20 metre height buffer, would equate to a maximum flight height of 120 metres, which is below the obstacle limitation surface level within the buffer area. Furthermore, the applicant has also provided a copy of email advice received from the President of the Model Aeronautical Association of Queensland, which confirms the site meets all requirements outlined by CASA to operate remote control airplanes. It's pretty clear. If you were going above 130 metres, then you would have issues. You have to have approvals from CASA. Now, the potential impacts on safety and efficiency of Yandina Coolum Road have been assessed by the state and council officers and are satisfied the use would not generate any impacts to the function of the major road corridor or cause an unreasonable level of risk to road users.
Councillor Hungerford, would you like
Yes,
an
please.
extension of time? Can I have someone move the extension of time? Councillor Burns, seconded. Councillor Landsberg, those in favour? Councillor Dixon? Hand up, thank you, that is carried
This is a different way of doing it.
It is. Thank you, Councillor Hungerford.
Okay, whilst the proposed buildings and structures may be visible from Yandina Coolum Road and the footprint of the development is likely to be visible from Mount Ninderry Lookout, The operation of remote controlled model aircraft is unlikely to cause any obtrusive visual impacts that would diminish the scenic values of the site and surrounding area. The proposed height of buildings would not impede views to the significant landscape features in the distance, and the proposed setback and low height of buildings would assist further reduce visual impacts to the scenic route. Furthermore, the scale and bulk of buildings associated with the development would result in far less visual impact than other buildings and structures existing in the nearby area, and would be relatively unobtrusive in the landscape. Due to the small scale of the buildings proposed and the distance of the site from Outlook and Mandurri, the built aspects of the development would not stand out in the landscape, which includes an expansive view over the areas of Merici River, Valdura and Yandina Creek, and beyond to Mount Coolum, Mount Peregian, the ocean, the airport and Majimba Island. Also, the grass runways, as viewed from the lookout, would not be entirely out of character with the range of geometric patterns found in the broader rural and farming landscape, which includes a mix of coloured and shaped environs. The site is included in a rural zone and contains good quality agricultural land. However, detailed assessment has determined that the use would be able to generally achieve the outcome sought for development in the rural area, as the location largely avoids impacts to any values on the site, would maintain the amenity of surrounding sensitive uses, and would not adversely impact the character of the area. The footprint of the development is located to minimise impact to agricultural production on the site, whilst also achieving an adequate level of separation from site boundaries to minimise amenity impacts on adjoining premises and visual impacts from Yandina Coolum Road. Now, in relation to the assessment of noise impacts, a noise impact assessment prepared by JT Environment Engineering Consultants confirmed that the use would easily achieve the noise criteria required to protect the health and well-being of the receiving environment. And I believe the differences from the different receptors there would be 380 metres up to 1.1 kilometres. So there's quite a separation there. The model investigated various scenarios based on 6 model aircraft flying simultaneously, noting that the application material proposes only 5 aircraft are permitted to fly at any time. Now, I have Phoenix model flyers in Kunda Park in my division. I've attended some of their days, and especially their end-of-year functions as the local councillor. This operation seems to be fairly similar to what they're doing. One small strip, there's a limited flight environment. We've got the plans up there, the map showing the strip. Because you can see it stays totally within its site, and the flying area around the cross runway there is only small. It doesn't even leave its own pattern. How that's going to affect other environments, I'm not quite sure. And they do only have 4 or 5 on the one-on-one for separation of aircraft, so they don't crash into each other when they fly. So, in the event that the application is approved, conditions could be applied to require the use and operate in accordance with the recommendations of noise impact assessment and to require compliance monitoring to maintain its operational. Now, in the conditions, I see the decibels is about 40 decibels for most of those environments that we hear at a plane at all, which is pretty low. That's background noise, basically. That's very low. And the planes I've witnessed are much the same. Furthermore, to ensure the rural amenity of the area is maintained on Sundays and public holidays, operating hours can be limited to weekdays, Saturdays and part day on Sunday. Council officers are therefore satisfied that the use will not result in unacceptable acoustic impacts on nearby uses and will not adversely impact the amenity and character of the area. The proposed use is appropriately limited to ensure no more than 20 club members and a total of 40 people attend the site on any particular day. The traffic likely to be generated by the use over a year would be equivalent or less to the amount of vehicle movements associated with the dwelling and secondary dwelling being established on each parcel of land.
Councillor, are you wrapping up there?
No, I'll go again.
I'll allow a second extension. Would someone move that extension of time? Councillor Landsberg, do I have a seconder? Councillor Bunner. I'll put that to the vote, councillors. Okay, so we have in favour of the extension of time, we have Councillor Broderick, Landsberg, Burns, Hungerford, Bunag, Law, Mayor Natoli and Councillor Dixon, and those against?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I don't think councillor.
Okay. Those against are Councillor Natoli and Councillor Suarez. The motion is carried. You may go again, Councillor Hungerford, please, if you could wrap up in this item.
I'll do my best because I learned this report and go through it.
We've read the report,
it.
Councillor.
I hope
I'm
you've
sure
all read
that the councillors here have read the report and done.
While some residents fronting Dines Road will be impacted by dust and noise from vehicles generated by the proposed use, it would be inappropriate and unreasonable to require road sealing needs to be undertaken to completely avoid dust impacts. And if you had extra lines going on each block, it would be exactly the same. In relation to the provision of parking spaces, it is determined that there was sufficient space on site for the required number of spaces to be provided, and that there would also be sufficient space for overflow parking to be provided if any events were to be held. I believe in the report there was 17 spaces minimum, the maximum of 40 people with only 20 pilots maximum at any time on the site. The development can also achieve to be conditioned to meet the requirements of prescribed other development codes in relation to landscape outcomes, safety and security, stormwater management, dust management and development works. So in conclusion, the proposed development sufficiently complies with the requirements of the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme 2014 and does not raise any significant issues that cannot be addressed by conditions. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. Now in Appendix A, as the conditions there's 11 pages of conditions and all assessment benchmarks are met. This is pretty conclusive. Now in the detailed assessment report, there's 49 pages and it covers all the points that are listed in this refusal. In my opinion, it obliterates it. So what I'm saying here is, here we have an application that's been properly assessed. It's within the right environment for a rural area. It's a low-key, small operation, and it's separated from distances. My Phoenix Club in Thunder Park has residents closer than these and has the 4-lane Richard Road right next to it. There has been no issues at all. I have never received any complaints. I'm not aware of any complaints from the Phoenix Club at all. And I've heard before that the club's been working out a Coolum up there, and there was no record of complaints there either. So this is a low impact of use in a rural area. And so I believe that the officer's recommendation for approval is the correct one, because what I've experienced in planning, and going through planning environment court decisions brought down, and what they apply to the town plan, if you get an appeal, you get a barrister for each side, and the court always sends it back to the parties to see whether they overcome any issues. And the barristers can say that if it's not a strong case, say they recommend that in the mediation we go to overturning the decision. In my opinion, on the strength of this, that would be a very not likely case, because I believe the conditions for refusing this are very weak. You look at the report, and I'll probably run near the end of my time, so I'll wind up there now.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Bunag.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I hope I can be heard in the gallery sufficiently. I'll do my best to do it outside, voice inside. I've just got a couple of questions through Ms. Johnson to you first. Councillor Landsberg made reference to previous operations of the multipliers at Bond Park, and just wanted to understand different zoning that is actually in that area. It's, as I understand it, it's zoned for industrial purposes versus rural purposes. Is that right?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, the site is zoned for industrial land.
Thank you. And it's right that in that area there was close proximity to a motocross track in that industrial precinct.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes. Yep.
Thank you. and I've got a question for Councillor Suarez. Given the proximity of the motocross track to the model flyers in an industrial area, it's fair to say it seems somewhat different to what's being proposed here. Did you receive, or have you received any complaints regarding those uses while they were in the Coolum industrial estate at the time?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Bonnet. Yes, I did receive complaints about the Model Aero Club in its vicinity in the Coolum Industrial Park. However, in context, the main complaint that I received from residents was about the motocross facility because the noise was a lot louder. However, emails that I received through the Office of Division 9 complained about the motocross noise and had statements or comments such as, when we're not hearing the motocross, then we're subjected to the Aero Model Club. A participant at the, there's a aqua park in the industrial park as well, and they host gym sessions. I've had participants at that gym also make complaints about the noise of the Model Aero Club. Not that it's loud, but it's constant, that it was very frequent. And they didn't make formal complaints, so we don't have a record on file of any formal complaints. But yes, I did receive complaints about the noise of the Model Aero Club.
Thank you. I have two more questions through you, Madam Mayor, for Ms Johnson. The first one is, what steps will Council be able to take to enforce the conditions of approval, in particular, the maximum of 40 people per day on site?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So in terms of the, so we've conditioned the maximum number of people as a reference. We've also conditioned a requirement for the operator to maintain a register of the attendees on site, and that council's able to request a copy to view that at any point. So that would be something that our compliance officers would investigate if the complaint was made about the number of people.
And just, sorry, I had two questions, now it's another two. Just to, through you, Madam Mayor, if a complaint is made, so in terms of a proactive development compliance follow-up, it would have to be complaint driven. Is that a fair assessment?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that's how our complaint management process would work. Reacting to a complaint. Yes.
And the last question I have is, there was some comments made by Councillor Suarez about what actually exists on site at the moment. Have any aspects of this application already been implemented on site prior to approval by the club?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, it's my understanding that there's been some building works or some buildings moved to the site, and there was compliance action taken as a result of that. But from what we're aware, that the operation of planes hasn't actually occurred. It's more that some building materials and I believe the Dunelma building were located on the site. Right.
Thank you very much, Ms Johnson. Madam Mayor, I might speak to the motion now, if that's okay.
Yes.
I'd like to start by thanking the many members of the community who have reached out to me, whether you're for or against it. It's nice to see that people actually have a variety of different perspectives and care about where they live. But the observation I'd like to, I guess, share with the submitters, the applicant, and community generally is that as the region grows in population by the state mandated population targets that we must accommodate, the available land areas suitable for certain activity will become fewer, and therefore the variety of potential uses in different areas to some extent will become greater by necessity. But I guess from my perspective, when contemplating those uses as a decision maker, I'm reminded by something that Councillor Dixon said in his first speech this term, quoting Errol Millbrook. When we make decisions, we're changing people's lives, and we ought to be mindful about how the impact from those more diverse uses might affect existing residents and long-established land use practices that exist in the vicinity of the creek. So I recognise the model flyers has been a victim of the land squeeze I've just talked about, as was the motocross pool, and that's now being forced out because of the real need for industrial land. As a young boy, I grew up in Coolum. I attended the motocross. I attended the model flyers. And it's little wonder that we didn't get a whole lot of noise complaints about the model flyers individually, because we've got a hell of a lot of complaints about the motocross. So that puts things in perspective, I guess, for that part of Coolum. But when I unpack what's being put in front of us, yes, we should be sympathetic to the plight of the North Flyers who are seeking to find a home, but for me, when it comes down to it, that sympathy does not extend to support this application. My view is that this isn't the right home for them at the present time or in the long term. For me, the stronger case rests with the residents in this area who I believe will be impacted by the scale and intensity of the use in an area that is simply not designed for it. And the words scale and intensity in this sense, for me, are important when we're talking about potentially consistent use of sport and rec. On the one hand, the planning report talks about the strategic framework and how this application achieves outcomes sought from the sport and recreation use. In particular, it states that the scale could be limited to minimise possible noise, traffic dust, and visual impacts, and the relevant conditions could be applied if the development were to be approved. This is apparently achieved by limiting visitors to a maximum of 40 people per day. And the control mechanism is to enforce this scale and intensity is apparently a logbook that is self-administered by the model flying club. To me, that seems like it's not going to actually happen. In the preceding paragraph, it states, the use is a competitive recreational activity which could attract visitors and spectators to the area if events were to be held. These assessment outcomes, in my view, are entirely inconsistent and says to me that the scale and intensity that is sought to be conditioned, limiting the number of visitors to 40 people per day, in reality is unrealistic, but it's almost incapable of meaningful enforcement by council proactively and sets the model flyers up for long-term failure and constant complaints and conflict with nearby residents. For me, the dust alone that would be generated along Giants Road by the proposed commissioned outcome would be too great for this area, let alone the dust that could be created for events on this site that I think will inevitably occur in the future. So the other thing that I want to make reference to is the very real concerns about the impacts of the post-implementation review by Air Services. Yes, it's fair to say that at the present time, at the time of assessment, that the airport overlays and the flight paths don't flow through this particular site, but we are very close to a post-implementation review and the recommendations of that and how that could potentially impact the club and this area, I think, is something that we need to be very, very mindful of. So the fact that the conditions won't allow all club members to be on the site at one time also tells me that this site is not appropriate for the use that is envisaged. What is required, and I commend Councillor Suarez for putting this into motion, is a regional approach for this hard to locate club and sport, and Councillor Suarez's motion makes reference to that. I don't think that we should willfully accept that this site unwittingly becomes the home for hard to locate schools in the region. I'm sympathetic, but I'm more sympathetic to the residents who live there. I'll be supporting Councillor Suarez's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bunag. Councillor Burns.
Thanks, through you, Madam Mayor. Just a question or two, if I may. So in the report, we have the noise consideration being that not really much more than ambient noise, 37 to 40 decibels, is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, at the sensitive receivers.
At the sensitive receivers. Does that noise consider jet-propelled model aeroplanes?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the noise impact modelling was on the worst case scenario, so they've modelled 6 jet airplanes operating at once, noting that the proposal is only for 5 aircraft to operate at any time.
Okay, so it is focused on the significant jet noise, not just standard.
Through you, Madam
Model
Mayor,
plane.
correct, yes.
Okay. In speaking to this revised motion, firstly, just commend Councillor Suarez for considering the feedback from her constituents in this proposal. There's a number of the items through the amended motion that I don't 100% agree with and feel like that they can be adequately addressed or considered. the thing in terms, they are things like the visual amenity. I'm not convinced that actually the built form and the use on this site is actually going to have any significant impact on the visual amenity of this area, not comparative to any other shed spaces or any other spaces. It's not going to be a height issue or any of those sorts of things. I do take the note around the traffic and the dust concerns around Dines Road. I think that the mitigation capacity for the flooding concerns are well able to be met. I am concerned about the noise concern on surrounding residents with the constant nature of it and the potential for this to be exercised in pretty well almost a 7-day-a-week thing, weather permitting, winds and all the rest of it, acknowledging that that's not going to be every day through a calendar year, but do appreciate that for residents living in a rural area, this noise actually could be really, really discomforting. I'm not concerned particularly about the acid sulphate source because the nature of the actual development is low. I think that the management of that is actually well and truly within the capacity of the applicant. I am concerned over the airport and aviation facilities and the close proximity to our aviation corridors, and notwithstanding also the post-implementation review that's been spoken about prior. That does concern me, and would hate to actually consider that we may be in a similar position trying to find a suitable location for the Suncoast Aero Model Club if a flight path adjustment is forthcoming, meaning that this site could not be used for that purpose anyway. That is a significant concern for me. I do actually support the idea of a regional approach to finding suitable land holdings for a regional facility for aero model activities. And so on the balance, I actually do want to actually support the residents in this area. I do recognise that their concerns around the impact on their amenity and them as residents in the day-to-day, to me, is of significance in regards to the concerns around the noise. And so, notwithstanding the areas that I feel like we could find mitigation efforts for, I will actually support this amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Councillor Natoli.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll take the opportunity to just speak straight to the motion. Obviously, I'm very sympathetic towards the Aero Model Club. They obviously have a passion and interest, and they deserve to have a location. But a location that obviously they can operate without the sort of constraints and the concerns that they've raised within the area. I understand that we get lots of applications and the community respond, and often the perception of the impact is far greater than the actual impact itself. But we don't know that until after it happens. And so I'm sympathetic to the modelling club, I'm sympathetic to the people that live in that area, because they've all invested their hard-earned money for lifestyle. And unfortunately, the planning scheme doesn't always take into account human emotion attached to their properties. You know, it's their castle, it's their place, it's their lifestyle. And anything that threatens that, they are impacted. Whether it's a perception or not, they're impacted. And sometimes that perception can lead to long-term. We had an issue December ago in terms of a multi-dwelling in Woolaba, and this person next door sold within a few weeks because they couldn't deal with this new building that was going to be built next to them. Their dream, their property, their home, their lifestyle was shattered by a council decision, yet it conformed to the planning scheme. So that's the real human element of the decisions that we make. I have had the opportunity to talk to a number of people, and the most interesting conversation I've had is probably with the property that's the closest, the horse riding school. And I heard that this could likely close their business down, and of course that sent alarms because it's a family-run business. They have a sole income that both of them require, and they've got people that they employ. And so I just didn't take that information without doing some further research. So I contacted a lady who's a leading expert in horses, and she's just published a book recently. And she was alarmed. I'll just read some of the things that she wrote, that she would be totally devastated if this was to happen next to her property. She said, horses' sensitivity is way more than ours, and we are both mammals and share similar responses to trigger like flying objects overhead differently. We can figure out there is no danger for humans, not the horses. Their flight area of the brain is way bigger than ours. Of course, they are food for prey, and survival in fleeing is their nature. Flying objects making noise overhead is really scary stuff for horses. The amygdala is a word that I didn't even know existed. What?
Amygdala.
Amygdala. Okay, thank you. Where the fear, panic emotion is situated in the brain is way bigger in horses. So the trigger for fear reaction is way more reactive in horses. Talk to any horse owner about fireworks. The noise frequently sends horses through fences. Simply dangerous. Just an illustration where helicopters or drones are used to herd wild horses. It's sheer panic in the herd flee. Horses go through fences, they just run and run through fences. So simply the size of the horse, and it's way bigger than ours. So the fear responses are way more sensitive, and sometimes simply we have no understanding why the horses take flight. Right. The size of that amygdala tells us why. Most people don't know this. So I researched and found a little bit more about this in the brain structure. It involves the emotional process of fear and anxiety responses in many species, including horses. Horses, being prey animals, have an evolved amygdala and helps them respond quickly to potential threats. Several studies suggest that horses can exhibit stress and anxiety responses to loud noises, including aircraft sounds. For example, a study published for the Journal of Equine Veterinary Science 2013 found that horses exhibited increased heart rates and stress behaviours when exposed to loud noises, including aeroplane sounds.
Councillor Natoli, would you like a request for an extension of time?
Yes.
Okay, can I have someone move that? Councillor Burns, someone second. Councillor Suarez. All those in favour? Dixon. Sorry. Visual of Councillor Dixon.
Yeah.
What's the visual?
Okay. Yes, okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Natoli.
A second study published in the Applied Animal Behaviour Science Journal 2015 found that horses showed increased anxiety and stress responses to sudden loud noises, including aircraft noise. If I owned a business and I relied on paying a mortgage and employed people, and I had potentially an impact that may not have been really understood by the noise expert. I can't say whether they are an expert in horses or went and gathered that information. But I have, and I had real concerns that this could potentially close it down. Again, perception. The people I've been riding, I took my cousin, the horse took fright, fell off, and was unconscious for hours. It's scary. Parents will react. They may take their business away from this riding school if we go ahead and do this. We don't know that. We don't know whether the business will close down, but the potential is there. And as far as I'm concerned, my duty is to make sure that there is no direct impact on anyone from the decisions that we make. In particular, when it comes to their livelihood and their business. And as much as I support finding a location for their remote monitoring pub, I can't, for the life of me, think that I can make a decision that could potentially shut down a business. So I want to support.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Councillor Law.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, a question, if I may, regarding the planning processes here, and I'm not sure who the question or who may be able to answer this, but we're talking about the use of land in a rural zone and that this may be a consistent use. The report suggests it could be, and the very detailed motion that we're considering now suggests that it isn't. In regard to it being a potentially consistent use or not, what sort of precedent is going to be set one way or the other, but particularly if we refuse this, is this going to create a precedent that will cause further issues and allow for unreasonable developments to occur? And I guess I'm referring back to the previous matter we considered here today in relation to the precedent being set, have we allowed that development application?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm going to start and I'm sure Steve wants to further. But, so in terms of the application, as you mentioned, it is a potentially consistent use, but it's still impact accessible. So we're not dealing with a code consistent use, which would be sort of what's clearly anticipated for the area. So with this particular use and in our proposal to recommend approval of it, it's very specific. So we're not just approving outdoor sport and recreation, which could be changed to a football club in the future. We're being very specific in terms of it being an outdoor sport and recreation aeromodelling club. So I think that answers part of the question in terms of if we were to approve it. It's not just saying any outdoor sport and rec in a rural zone is okay, and that's going forward. So in terms of us recommending approval, the way we've limited it and been really clear in describing it, but also the fact that it's so a potentially consistent use. In terms of the refusal, that's something, obviously that would be subject to potentially appeal by the applicant and follow through that process. But I wouldn't say the refusal itself would set a specific precedent. To add anything, but hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Just to clarify, so I'll make sure I have understood. I understand about the approval and how you've restricted that. In terms of if the refusal is supported today, that is just going to not create a precedent and it will maintain the current zoning being rural. It simply reinforces that. So there's no, we're just not creating precedent one way or the other.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, the refusal would just mean that there's no development approved on the site, it remains as a rural zoning, and any future applications would follow through a similar assessment process.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. And through you, Madam Mayor, if I might speak to the motion. Clearly we've generated a lot of community interest, which is absolutely understanding given the nature of this application and how it would impact local people in this area and, as we've just heard, other businesses too. I guess part of the things that concern me are the road ceiling, and in Division 10, which I represent, we've got about 180 kilometres of dirt road. And if I imagine the change of use on this little stretch of dirt road for the people who live there, I know that I will be receiving a high volume of complaints and concerns at the intensity of the use on the days when the club is operating. I accept if you average it out over a year, the actual use may not be more than 1 or 2 vehicles as if you were approving a residence to be here. But the intensity that you would get on the days of operation will generate complaints, I would suggest, all of the time. So that's a big concern for me. One of the things that we've heard a little bit about is some fairly subjective comments around lifestyle. What one person's lifestyle is versus another is quite different. So we have to rely on the objectivity of the planning scheme. An example of that, I grew up, my father was in the Air Force, which meant I spent a lot of time around planes, big ones. And I loved hanging out at the runway watching huge military Air Force planes going in and out. That really was awesome. So what I think is a great lifestyle clearly doesn't suit everyone. So it is very, very subjective what lifestyle is. So we've got a planning scheme to help us with that is very, very consistent and subjective. I would make the observation that the refusal you've put forward is very detailed, extremely well considered in the light of the planning scheme, and very, very objective. Well done for doing that. It is very clear to see what you're doing and how it responds to the development application in a very objective, sound, meaningful way. But the absolute clincher for me, and I have been very consistent with this throughout, whether or not an application is being recommended for refusal or approval, but we don't approve development of any kind on flood-prone land. It doesn't make any sense. We know what is likely to happen in this area, and when we get some fairly extreme weather, we know that the ground under the solar farm will go underwater, which is why it's up in the air, to make it work and to keep it out of the flood zone. And it's why that very unproductive, unuseful land was used for a solar farm. But I cannot support development in the floodplain. I will be supporting the refusal of this motion that has been put up today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. We'll go next to Councillor Broderick.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, and welcome to everybody in the gallery today as well. So thank you for your support of this. Thank you to the officers for putting the report together. It's been a long one, and thank you to Councillor Maria for very comprehensive and extensive research to this. Excellent, thank you. I just have a couple of questions to start. A lot of them have been covered already, so thanks for taking care of that, everybody. But just to get back to a few things, we've got the Model Aero Club that meet currently. Do we have numbers on their current membership?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't believe they meet currently because they don't have a site currently. I don't have the specific numbers of the club.
I'm just going to cut through a few of these because we've covered a lot of them already, but just to get my head around this as well, and in the location and near Valdora, is there a shooting range nearby, and how close is it to this particular area?
For you, Madam Mayor, I understand there's a shooting range at North Arm. In terms of specific distance, I wouldn't have that figure available.
So is the noise from the shooting range also impacting this area as well as the overhead flights that they're already experiencing?
For you, Madam Mayor, and I'm not sure if anyone knows further, but I don't believe so. There's no consideration of the application.
And just going back to some of the things we've been talking about before, in your opinion, is there room for growth for the club in this area?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we are only able to assess the application that's in front of us. They've put forward a really specific cap in terms of the number of people they propose to have on the site and visitors. That's the number we're looking at. Unfortunately, we're not able to consider a hypothetical growth scenario in this case. We're only able to consider the application material in front of us, and that's what their recommendation is based on in this case.
And a lot of my other questions had to do with those that Councillor Barnack has already covered in relation to compliance as well as growth. So I think I might just speak to now. Most of it's been covered, so thank you to all the councillors for covering that. Really appreciate, like we said, Councillor Maria going to such extent. In relation to the dirt road, I agree that it would be an appropriate expectation of the club to be able to seal that road to help mitigate that dust, because we know how community groups operate and what low budget they operate on as well. And given that the residents are potentially already hearing planes as well in that area, we're talking about, like we said, we're talking about the intensity and the consistency and the scale intensity of that noise as well. So I agree with Councillor Taylor that we're setting the club up for failure with their limited ability to grow if the numbers are only set that low, if they're only allowed to have that many planes, if they're only allowed to have that many people, and compliance is only complaint driven. So then there's an issue that I have there as well. And I think that the club should have a place to go where they have a place to grow and thrive, and also a space where clubs can come together and they can host events in an area that's appropriate, that isn't going to affect the residents and nearby businesses. Councillor Maria used the phrase that we are hamstringing the growth of the club with this location, and I do therefore agree with the proposal to advocate to the state to facilitate the establishment of a regional area modelling facility where the club has the opportunity to grow, amalgamate if they decide to, and host the events that they want to host when they want to host them, instead of having to come back to council time and time again. I would be concerned about the limited complaint-only compliance monitoring that is dependent on potentially inconsistent member use and data collation, and us having to respond to that and then ensuring that the data is correct. I think there are issues with that, and it's also time consumptive for both parties. I also agree with Councillor Maria's alternate motion generally, just like Councillor Tim was saying. I do have I think some of the line items can be mitigated and dealt with. However, overall, I agree with the proposed motion for Maria. So thank you for everybody for bringing their information today. Thank you to the gallery for being here too.
Thank you, Councillor Broderick. We're now going to go to Councillor Dixon. And Councillor Dixon is on Teams. We'll have him on speaker and do our very best to be able to hear his speaking and his debate. Are you there, Councillor Dixon? Oh, hang on, we're going to have to turn you up. Can you try again, Councillor Dixon? Yes.
Yes, okay, I'll give this a go. Firstly, I just went through the bit. That's why I thank the Aero Club consultants, the applicant, and also council staff for the information they provided, because I have followed up council staff and the applicant on questioning, so I appreciate the responses we got. The truth is, we've had a lot of feedback from the community and club members, but I think the feedback from the local community has been overwhelming, and it has been very clear. In fact, they've asked us to put ourselves in their shoes, living in a quiet environment, and how this application would impact them. Let's not hide from the fact that the community in this area has had to bear the brunt of the Sunshine Coast International Airport. When the region said we needed an international airport to expand, the good people in this area had to take it on the chin and carry the load of heavy noise in that yard. So I think it's on us to draw the line at some point in time and say enough is enough. They are already carrying a heavy load for the region. In the correspondence from local residents, they made it very clear about the amenity. In fact, one gentleman used to live in Division 6 and he moved out into Councillor Maria's area because he wanted to live in a very quiet place where the amenity is higher. For him, it was about having a relaxed environment and being away from the hustle and bustle. Madam Mayor, there's probably a lot of other reasons we could go into, but I think the truth is it's not just about abandoning the club here. Councillor Maria has talked about what we can do to support them, to a regional strategy working with the state government. I don't believe this is the end of the journey, and it shouldn't be. In fact, all of the comments I've heard here today is that councillors want to support the club and find them a home, and I really hope we can stick to that. For the reasons I've heard today and other speakers, and particularly Councillor Maria, I will be backing the Deputy Mayor's approach for a refusal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Hungerford, do you still have a question? No.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Part C. We've had a regional facilities plan for difficulty to locate sports. That's been there since March 2019. Two is to undertake a review of council land that may be suitable for relocation. My question is, that's been in place. I remember when this club first were told they're going to have to move out of the industrial estate town for industrial land expansion. They came to council seeking our assistance in helping them relocate and find another spot. What has been our response to that?
For you, Madam Mayor, probably not one I can answer. Obviously, in development assessment, we're only assessing the applications. I do understand that there has been some assistance provided.
Okay, we
Coming up
have
further.
Group Executive
Thank
Deborah
you, Deborah.
Robinson walking up. So over to you, Ms Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hungerford, for raising that. We have looked at some other alternate sites, that was some time ago, to see whether or not there were some sites where this facility could be located, because it is a difficult to locate sport, there is no question about that. Some of those sites would require us to advocate, as requested here, to state government, because as Councillor Suarez has mentioned, really it should be looked at as a regional-wide facility. In my discussions with Moreton Bay Regional Council, they are also have got era model or similar type clubs where they want to relocate as well, and they basically were also looking at a more SEQ-wide location. So we haven't been successful in finding something. That's not to say since we looked at council-owned land some time ago, we've purchased more land, so it's probably worth us just having another scan of that environment and then having a look and having a chat and advocating to state government, because we do believe that this is a regional-wide facility as outlined by Councillor Suarez.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Landsberg, would you wish to speak?
Could I ask
A question? Yes.
Sorry, Tegan, sorry, officer. Presenting, my apologies, we're all over the place today. On the northern side of Maroochy River, I believe land was purchased there several years ago. I've got a Godfrey Road, I believe. What was the intent for that use of that land? Does anybody have an answer for that?
Okay, our Group Executive Bill Hadrell is going to come up to the lectern. Mr Hadrell?
Madam Mayor, for you, Councillor, in part of Council's long-term planning for sport and recreation purposes, there are a number of regional sports facilities that have been identified to cater for additional, organised sports, fields, soccer, footy, whatever it might turn out to be. And certainly the primary intent of those regional sport facilities, the one that's coming out of the ground at Honey Farm Road, and the purpose of acquiring the land north of the Maroochy River is to service our community with future regional sports facilities for primarily organised sports, but also ancillary or supporting passive recreation opportunities. To be clear, it was not intended and probably deemed unsuitable for the purposes of supporting any form of difficult to locate sport, just due to the incompatibility with the uses that we're looking to put that land to.
Thank you, Mr Hadrell. Councillor Landsberg?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I speak to the refusal motion, please? Councillors, obviously, very emotive discussion today on both sides. Very well presented alternative motion. Councillor Maria, I really see support and a credit to you representing the community. It's great to see them here in numbers today, and as well as the interest online and what we've received as well through council. For myself as a councillor, and obviously representing the economic development portfolio, I represent the most southern division on the Sunshine Coast, Caloundra, and the growth that's coming to us. We know we're looking at 200,000 plus people over the next 20 years. And we have so much constrained issues with actually making available land, as we just heard from Mr Bill Hadrell, in regards to finding land that is actually used or available for alternative uses. This type of activity, to me, is a member of the Suncoast Flyers Club. You can participate as a 10-year-old and an 80-odd-year-old. I mean, the opportunities for a young kid to participate in a sport of remote control flying planes is an incredible opportunity. We've looked at the evolution of remote controlled aircraft over 100 years, and in regards to starting off with remote controlled boats, and then obviously it's led into where we are today. And as we look at aviation aerospace, it's one of our priorities for the RES, which is our Regional Economic Development Strategy. And how wonderful would it be to see a young entrepreneur that comes through aviation or aerospace, and with those abilities that they learn through the operations of remote controlled aircraft and the ability to learn. And I know this club also has interest as part of STEM programs as well for our schools. So to see this opportunity lost today would be a great loss to our younger generation of aspiring remote control aviators. In the previous term of council, I had a club come to me and worked very hard through Councillor Winston here, and I'm able to be here due to not feeling well, but the Sunshine Coast Bonus Club. Now, for a group of archers that like to participate and enjoy their sport, we could not find a location on the Sunshine Coast for them to operate. And to me, this is really, we are letting our community down in regards to working hard. And you've got a planning team here today that's presented a report that is factual in all the assessments, the conditions of approval that have been put down, and the approval that's been put up from council today has been very well supported from myself, and I believe the team, which we have highly experienced planners on board. I know we touched on the planning scheme, and our current planning scheme is in for the state government as a state interest review. Now, I can understand different types of uses, and in the previous agenda item that we had as well, as a planning scheme that we're looking at, it's going to come back to council as a draft to go back out to community consultation. The opportunities for us to look at alternative uses in certain rural zones for different types of uses, I think will be need to be looked at as a growing community and a lot of challenges. I live in Curramundi, and most weekends I can hear skydivers jumping out of the plane, and little old Cessna that flies up to 14,000 feet, and I've jumped out of the Cessna, little old Cessna, and thank God we're wearing a parachute because that plane is really not in the best mechanic. I'm sorry, but and it's already been floated with many skydivers across the coast, but I'm looking forward to them upgrading it to possibly an EV plane. But to get back on track, comment to setting the club up for future opportunities. We are setting the club up for failure today. And for me as a councillor, I cannot support this refusal motion. It looks like the numbers will probably go the other way, but I'll leave it at that. And thank you for the very expansive and the work that the team have done in regards to this document today. I think you've done a fantastic job of presenting this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillors, decisions in this chamber are difficult. What you've seen here today in this debate is a real indication of how the people, my colleagues around this chamber, consider the reports, consider the submissions, the emails that we receive, take all of that on board. The decisions we make impact heavily on people's lives, and it is a responsibility that weighs heavily. In this particular situation, noise, dust, flood, serious impacts on our residents. And our residents have told us that they wish to be heard. The submissions, as I said, were numerous. The emails have continued, and those voices oftentimes speak for people who can't have their voices heard. And in this case, that includes some of the horses and the business owners. So it has been heartening to hear my colleagues speak to represent the people of the Sunshine Coast. To Councillor Suarez, who has developed in conjunction with our officers this alternate motion, this motion that we have before us. Thank you for doing that and for considering our residents in this, and you will have my support when it comes time in a few moments. So thank you, councillors. Councillor Suarez, for you to close.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I really appreciated the debate today, and I completely agree with a lot of the points of view that have been put out in favour of the club. I too am very much in favour of the club and its operations. However, the location to continue this operation is not suitable. In this role, I have mentioned to the Model Aero Club, and I've also mentioned to the residents of Eldora, I consider that our role as councillors are to be the voice of the people who cannot raise their hand in this meeting. What was very clear was when the submissions came through, it was the surrounding residents of Eldora and nearby that were very opposed to this application. And those who were in support were spread across the region. We need to understand that this is a difficult to locate sport, and it's difficult to locate for a reason. You don't put them near built up urban areas because of the impact. Well, I can tell you this for free. Residents who live in rural areas matter just as much as residents who live in urban areas. They still get impacted. Just because there's fewer of them doesn't mean they don't matter. So I'll just go back to the development and the planning side of things. Firstly, thank you to the development assessment team. I know that you guys have assessed this application on the information that was provided, despite our officers asking for further information and some of that not being provided. So I do appreciate the work that you have done on the information that was given to you. I'm very pleased that everyone's pretty much given their opinion. I don't have to remind you, I suppose, about the potentially consistent use where only where further assessment has determined the use is appropriate with regard to location, nature, scale and intensity. The rural flood-prone areas of Division 9 should not be considered the dumping ground for difficult to locate sports. We heard about precedent before, and I think that this would set a precedent. So I'm very pleased to have the support of the majority of councillors here today. The Suncoast Aero Model Club, more broadly, require a solution, and they require a long-term solution. This site doesn't provide that long-term solution. In fact, our own officers' report restricts it to a maximum tenure of 10 years. It's heavily conditioned, and it's self-reliant on self-regulation. The location's not suitable to the residents. It's perhaps not suitable to future airport operations. And while the site is required, I will endeavour to work with council, as I have in the past, to try and look for alternative sites that will ensure some longevity for the club, will ensure that the club will be able to grow, and I will seek support, with the assistance of the CEO, seek support from the state government to enable that to occur. I thank the councillors for their debate and thank you for your support.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. We'll just wait for Councillor Dixon to come here so we can have a visual on him. Okay, so councillors, this is a motion for refusal, and so I'll ask for those in favour of the refusal to please raise your hand. So that is Councillors Broderick, Burns, Natoli, Dixon, Bonag, Suarez, Law and Mayor Natoli. Those against, Landsberg and Hungerford, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We are now going to break for lunch. Thank you, officers, for your work here